Some guys don't leave you. They bury you alive and give it the name of destiny. Thomas Whitmore was more than a husband. He was the one Sarah relied on with her life. But in the desert blaze of the Mojave Desert, beneath a sun so ferocious that it had the potential to sear the air from your lungs, that trust disintegrated. Sarah ran in the sand, her leg ballooning from a rattlesnake's bite, the venom inching its way into her heart. She was convinced her husband would battle to save her. Instead, he stole from her. Without a word, his hand found her apron pocket, pulling out the silver locket her mother had given her on her 16th birthday. He tucked it into his own pocket, picked up their final canteen of water, scooped up the pouch of change and turned away. No hesitation, no look, just the deliberate crunch of boots through red dust, fading with each beat of her heart. People say the desert doesn't just kill, it takes a part of you. For Sarah, the rumble of his going was more terrible than the rustling of the snake. And in an instant, both the man and hope melted away in the heat mist. The day had otherwise been the same. Wagon wheels creaking, sun rising, heat weighing down like a blanket. At noon, the axle broke neatly in two, Thomas swearing at the wheel. Sarah ducked under the canopy of a Joshua tree, only for an instant of relief. But the desert has a vicious sense of timing. The rattlesnake bit before she could blink. Two swift fangs, a flash of agony, and the flames started to crawl up her leg. The people in Calico had warned her, "The desert doesn't take you quick. It makes you suffer first." Sarah lay there realizing. Her mouth was cracked, her heart racing against her ears. The sun overhead seemed to curve lower just to see her suffer. She knew no one was coming, not unless the good Lord himself dispatched them. And then, she heard it. Hoofbeats. Initially faint. So faint she wondered if her mind was playing tricks on her. But they got louder. A shadow crossed her face. She was made to open her eyes, and saw him, a figure on horseback, broad-shouldered under a dust-reddened shirt, brim of his hat low against the sun's glare, eyes that surveyed the land as if he owned it. His name was Jack Rohr, but out here names were meaningless. What was important was what a man did when trouble knocked on the door. Jack swung down out of the saddle with the loose economy of a horseman who'd spent his life in the saddle. He didn't waste breath on questions. His gaze went directly to her leg, where the skin was swollen and angry red. Most men go numb at the sight of a rattler bite. Jack didn't. No hesitation, he pulled out a long knife, carved two shallow gashes above the puncture, and stooped low. Venom and blood mingled on his tongue. Sin bitter as, but he didn't let up. Draw spit once more. The old method may not work every time, but out here in the desert you do what you can. Sarah floated in and out, seeing only glimpses of his face, and wondering if the stranger was an answer to her prayer, or the next man to leave her in the dust. The blue above was deep and seemingly endless, and the atmosphere reeked of horse sweat and leather. Sarah barely sensed the chill of water against her lips, the precious last drops from Jack's canteen. His voice was a low, even whisper, exhorting her to keep going, though the sounds seemed to be miles away. When he put her on top of the horse, putting her in front of him, she was light, merely a delicate shadow against the burning sun. The return ride was a smear of sound and movement. The thudding beat of hooves, the dry air nipping her flesh, the world rocking to every step. Jack never once glanced back. Men who have spent too many years in the desert know better than to look death in the eye a second time. Jack's cabin was little worn wooden walls scratched by wind and time, a creaking porch beneath every step, and the ever-present smell of coffee wafting from a pot beside the fire. Sarah in and out of fever for 2 days, her head pursued by mad dreams. Jack cared for her leg, rebandaged it, and made her drink enough water to stave off death. But in the desert, tranquility is merely the calm before a storm. And Jack knew it couldn't last. It began as a rumor, horseshoes in the distance, soft as a pulse beneath sand. After 3 mornings, the quiet outside had grown thick, threatening. Jack was chopping wood when he saw one man coming up the path. Tall, thin,
Lo hat Brim.
the kind of strut that never took to a friend. Thomas Whitmore. Jack didn't need to ask his name. He could read the truth in the man's shifting eyes and the way his hand hovered close to his belt. Thomas stopped 10 paces from the porch. "I'm here for my wife," he said, his voice low, carrying a venom Sarah would have recognized in an instant. Jack descended from the porch. "She's not yours to take."
Nos chaut. Nos swagger.
But only the voice of a man who had already made his mind up about what was going to happen next. The battle came quickly. Thomas charged, all anger and desperation. Boots dug into the earth, fists thudded into flesh, and the two men went crashing down. Thomas swung wildly, but Jack fought like a man who had dealt with trouble before. One quick push sent Thomas flying into the dust. Winded. He got to his feet, holding his ribs. "Not over," he snarled, turning away. His glinting eyes vowed he'd be back, and he'd bring friends. Jack stood and watched until Thomas was barely a dot dissolving in the heat wave. At the cabin door, Sarah had already gone pale but stood firm, hearing enough to realize this was hardly over. "Out here, you don't pick your fight, only how prepared you are when it arrives." For a couple of days, the desert was peaceful once more. Sarah walked brief circuits outside, legs sore but growing stronger with every step. And then, the noise came back. Hoofbeats. At first, only a hum like a distant drum. But with every step it came closer, until the earth itself seemed to shake. A dust cloud formed on the horizon, not from a solitary horseman, but a buggy traveling at a good clip, kicking up a track wide enough to make threats. And in this country, a threat like that was never unfulfilled. From the barn, Jack emerged, wiping his hands on a rag. The buggy came to a crawl and then stopped directly in front of the cabin. First down was Sheriff Miller, a burly man, sunburned and squinting with the sort of look only desert years can etch into a lawman. And directly behind him, Thomas. A new shirt, a self-satisfied smile, and not a scratch to be seen from their previous fight, like the desert had scrubbed him clean. Sarah stalled on the porch, her complexion going white. Thomas didn't hesitate. "Sheriff, that's my wife," he said, each sentence honed like he'd practiced it 100 times. The sheriff's eyes darted between them, perplexity furrowing his brow. "Jack, Sarah, I was informed she was missing, and now she stands here on your porch." Sarah's tone was firm, but her hands clutched the porch railing. She spoke the truth, of the rattlesnake, of being abandoned to die, of Jack's rescue when no one else would. Thomas laughed. Short, sharp, cruel. "She's delirious, Sheriff. This man's been filling her brain with lies." Jack didn't blink, didn't reach for the Colt on his hip. He just stood there, solid as a fence post stuck deep in the hard earth. "She's not going anywhere with you," he said, as plain as day. The air grew tight. Out here, the law might go either way depending on what story held fast. And in the blistering heat of that sun, Sarah understood. This wasn't merely a battle for her freedom. It was a battle for the truth. The sheriff's eyes darted back and forth. Thomas's tight jaw, Sarah's unyielding eyes. The desert wind caught up, yanking at the brim of his hat. Then he took his time speaking. "Vance, you're not taking her. Not today. Not any day." Thomas's smug grin vanished, leaving his face pale and tight. The sheriff's voice hardened. "And we're going to have a real talk about false reports, and maybe attempted murder." He nodded toward the buggy. "Get in." Thomas grunted something under his breath, but complied. His boots crunched through the dirt, the noise dying away as he climbed into the buggy. The buggy wheeled around, rolling off in a cloud of dust. And as suddenly, the danger was past. Sarah exhaled a breath she hadn't known she'd been holding. Her knees were weak, but before she had a chance to sit, Jack had been by her side. Not a word, just standing there until her breathing evened out. Those weeks that followed were different. The desert remained unforgiving, but for some reason less isolating. They worked together, repairing fences, cultivating Martha's long-abandoned garden, eating in silence on the porch as the sun set low. Jack was always a solitary man, but the silence now felt warmer. And Sarah, who had been left for dead under the scorching sun, came to find faith in something she thought she had lost forever. The feeling of home. One night, as the sky was aflame and the first stars twinkled to life, Sarah gazed at him. "You saved my life," she breathed. Jack shook his head.
No.
"You saved your own. I only provided the opportunity. Out here, opportunities don't come easily. Perhaps that's why they're so important." His words lingered in the hot desert air. And I wonder how many of us have walked away from something or someone that we should have fought for. How many times has life offered us a second chance, only for us to let it slip through our fingers because we were too blind, too stubborn, or too afraid to grab it? If you were standing in Jack's shoes or Sarah's, what would you have done? If the story stirred something in you, give it a like, share it with a friend, and subscribe, because the West still has plenty of stories to tell. And trust me, you won't want to miss the next ride.